Welcome to another episode of the Life in Motion podcast. Our topic for this episode is yoga and physical therapy, connections of mind, body, and philosophies. Our guests are Dr. Lori Zucker and Dr. Ellen Z. Anderson. Lori has been a physical therapist for over 30 years and a dedicated yogi since 2001, who completed her 300-hour teacher training in 2011. Lori has been integrating yoga into her practice for many years, helping to bring a clinical perspective and yogic principles to new generations of PT. Ellen is an associate professor of physical therapy at Rutgers University. She is a published author in scientific journals and has spoken internationally on issues related to physical activity and wellness. Together, the two ladies are both part owners and lecturers for YogiAnatomy, a company that provides continuing education for rehabilitation and yoga professions on topics related to complementary approaches for managing well-being, health, and function. Welcome again, ladies, and I appreciate you coming back as guests in the Life in Motion podcast.
We're happy to be here, Dan. Thank you so much for asking us.
Thanks for giving us a chance to talk about a subject that we love and hope you'll see we're very enthusiastic about.
First question I have to ask is, what exactly is yoga? I mean, layman like me, even a PT, tends to know only the crazy difficult positions and postures and the grunting and the stretching, but really, what is yoga?
Okay, so we spend about 20 minutes talking about what is yoga when we teach our workshops, but here's the basic one-liner. It's a pathway to enlightenment, it's a pathway to happiness, it's a pathway to separating yourself from suffering.
Wow. Okay.
So people come to physical therapy to get rid of their pain or to help heal, and yoga is another layer to not only heal but separate yourself from suffering.
Wow. I think that's a great one-liner. That really just, even my limited knowledge base understands, oh, yeah, but there's going to be like multiple aspects to that. Would you say, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say multiple aspects indeed, because even what we're learning, if we focus just on pain, and we tend to think of suffering and pain going hand to hand, think about what we're learning and our different approach to pain science and how there's not just one mechanism. And I think yoga probably has addressed that for thousands of years. There's many different mechanisms to separate yourself from that suffering.
Right. Tissue impairment does not necessarily mean pain or functional limitation, right? But sometimes there's a disconnect, and the old practice of thousands of years may not have systematic reviews, but they figured it out way before Western culture has, So I guess, are there any specific disciplines or subsets of yoga that a physical therapist might encounter more than others?
So if we think about kind of the three areas of yoga or yoga practices, you think about the practice of the postures called asanas, the practice of breathing in yoga would be pranayama, and also meditation. And Laura, we talk a lot in our continuing education courses about how physical therapists can tap into each one of those areas and incorporate it into patient care.
Actually, yesterday I was working with a client of mine who strained her low back. She's about 75 years old, and in COVID, she's been much more active than she had been before. She has more time, and on Friday, she strained her back. So we gave it a couple of days rest. And yesterday, we did some stretching, things that are very familiar to rehab professionals. And then we ended our session with 10 minutes of breathing exercises that were very much yogic in a comfortable hook-lying position, but then breathing. And the way I explained it to her was we did stretching from the outside in the beginning. And now that breathing, deep breathing, using your diaphragm, is stretching from the inside out. So that by expanding your chest, by expanding your lungs, by stretching, you got an internal stretch where you wouldn't otherwise get it from the outside in.
I remember there was this continuing ed program, I forget which one, that had an amazing tagline. nothing else matters if you can't breathe. And
100%.
and I love how you just zeroed in on that. And there is a mechanical aspect to breathing that, as us physical therapists, with our knowledge of the diaphragm and the rib cage and the ribs, that's just a perfect marriage of two knowledge bases. So I get that part. Now, just so that we can tease it out even further, how would you quickly educate somebody off the street about when they might conflate, say, yoga with Pilates or Tai Chi or Barre or other popular forms of physical activity? What do you think would be different from each of those forms from, say, yoga?
Okay, so one thing that yoga is connecting the mind and the body. So we can look at it as a mind-body practice, and that means that there is attention being paid to the movement or the activity almost at every moment, and that when you're practicing those postures, those asanas, it is linked with breath. And so that's another mechanism or strategy for linking, body with mind, this attention. Now let's put that to some of the practices that you suggested. So, Lori, take one and go.
So the other thing I would like to add to what Ellen said is that yoga is a philosophy of life. It's a lifestyle activity. It's a holistic activity. And it's true that Pilates is hugely beneficial, but Joseph Pilates came onto the scene around World War I, and yoga came onto the scene 5,000 years ago. And so there really is a difference. And so if I am working with a client and I am taking, let's say, the holistic whole body approach of linking the mind and the body, that's inherent in a yoga practice and in a yoga philosophy. In Pilates, I think it's an excellent core strengthening. I really like the basis of where and how Joseph Pilates came to his approach, but it's not a philosophy of life. It doesn't integrate all the things that yoga has going for it. So I look at Pilates as an exercise approach, very useful. I look at yoga as a holistic approach to living your life. And again, mentioning this suffering piece, I'm not sure that Pilates has the intention of separating you from your suffering, whereas yoga really does. A different one?
Oh, a different one?
Tai Chi or Barre, I mean, those are the two most common things.
So if you think about Tai Chi is maybe perhaps not a philosophy, but there's a lot of similarity in the attention and intention that is paid to those forms that are Tai Chi or Qigong. And so I think that you could make a case that Tai Chi is also a mind-body approach. Something that's barre or bar work, that type of thing, when the instructor says, I want you to feel the burn in your butt, that's maybe a mind-body connection.
It's like a gym rat saying, one more rep, come on, man, go, one more rep. So it's just like a more gentle version of doing that, I guess.
Tai Chi also comes with, of course, an ancient tradition.
Right.
But it also incorporates breathing and certain things that you have to breathe with Pilates and you have to breathe with bar practices, but it's not inherent in the approach, but it is in both yoga and Tai Chi. And then the last thing about yoga and Tai Chi coming together is movement of energy. We know, and it is clear in our world today, that pretty much everything is energy-based. And both yoga and Tai Chi are meant to shift your energy, help you control it, learn about it. That would not be the case for bar or Pilates. And some people will think the idea of shifting and moving energy is a little hokey. But yet, if you look in the world of psychology, they're going to tell you on the most simple basis, if you want to change your attitude or your energy or your feeling, change your position. You're slumped over, sit up. You're sitting and you feel crummy, stand up and run. It's inherent there. And then we have that in both Tai Chi and yoga, not so much in the other two.
I think a common thread I see this is, what's being encouraged now in clinical practice as a PT for me is self-efficacy, where you're trying to guide your patient to be able to draw and be able to do for themselves. And your job is to be a guide. One of the thought leaders I follow in PT says, in physical therapy practice, you have to be Alfred. You shouldn't be Batman. Your patient should be Batman. So I guess when you teach your practitioners how to connect to their minds, how to help them move their bodies, that's really more or less the same thing, just from a different school of thought or perspective. And I think that's what I appreciate and respect about the practice.
Mhm.
Now, I guess the next question I think I have, which is very interesting, is how was it like to marry a Western medical model and education that you guys obviously have with something that is like thousands of years old, that has underpinnings of Eastern philosophies and ideas? How does that, right? That's an interesting.
Yeah, so I think for me, part of it is that I became a yogi, like I became a yoga practitioner, but you can't ever really kind of leave that physical therapy hat behind,
You
right?
can't just put
So yeah,
it.
it's really hard to do that. In the beginning, it's an interesting balance because you want to be able to participate in the practice fully and be mindful as you're doing it, but you can't help but be the physical therapist who's thinking about the muscle action when
What is
you're
my
at
iliopsoas doing? Why can't I do this? What is limiting me? Wow.
exactly, exactly. And so that for me, that process of being a yogi and also being a physical therapist helped me see associations that I thought would be valuable for a patient population.
And for me, it was, I mean, this is what I say when I'm teaching in the yoga world, that my following the yogic philosophy and taking classes and being a yogi has made me a better physical therapist because I was able to integrate the two. There's some amazing approaches to physical movement and stretching that comes out of the yoga world. There's absolutely no reason why rehab professionals couldn't come up with those things also, but you just don't see it all that often in the clinic, and you don't see it all that often from your colleagues, and so it doesn't come up. You don't think about it, and so I feel that that was an integration that really made me a better therapist. And then it also gave me my yoga world a way of talking about some things that might be a little difficult for patients to listen to, because I could say, well, in my yoga training, and then say what I want to say. There's a discussion about food and eating healthy and doing this or doing that. And it wasn't like, you patient have to lose weight, or you patient aren't doing the right thing. I could say, well, listen, posture plays a big role, and I could talk about yoga. And it takes I can bring the information in without it being a direct hit that would make somebody feel bad and not want to come back.
Mm, mm. I see. So it gives you more. It becomes like a chicken and an egg question for me then. Like, where does the physical therapist and the yoga part of it end or begin? And you just see seamless transitions, I guess, right? In the depth of your studies.
Well, I'll give you an example, and Lori may be like, that's a terrible example, but I'll say it anyway. So, let's say that you're going to do a side bench stretch, right? And so, as a physical therapist, you ask your patient to bring your ear closer to your shoulder, and then you see this happen. You say, okay, drop that shoulder down. Just want you to hold it there. I'm going to count to 10. All right. Okay, now we're going to go to 15. Let's increase the stretch of the whole time, right? A yoga approach would be, okay, what I want you to do is bring your ear towards your shoulder. Okay, now imagine that your shoulders are dropping back and down. And what I want you to do is release tension anywhere else. I want you to root down now in your sit bones on evenly, both on the left side and the right side. Okay, now that you feel grounded and settled, Your head and neck is still in the same position. Release any other tension you have. And now put your hand on your belly and let's take a nice deep diaphragmatic breath while you hold it for 3 more counts. Same darn stretch, okay? But it was delivered very differently.
What was it?
That's a great example.
Okay.
A great example. And it's because of all of that, because of all those instructions, another layer is imagine that very same patient came in anxious, came in upset about a fight that he or she just had, or a boss that yelled at you. They come into therapy and they listen and they try hard to do what Ellen just described. And now what you've done is separate them for those minutes from the stress and anxiety they walked in the door with. So not only did you get what physical therapists would call a good thing or a desired outcome, you also got a separation from their anxiety state or their stress state, which would be an integration of therapy and yoga. And so I will often do something just like that, knowing that I'm looking for 2 things, not just one. Mm-hmm. And I will tell you just one story that I learned this really from my yoga teacher so many years ago. It was probably 25 or 26 years ago, where I went in. It was a 6:15 class in the evening on a Tuesday night. I had 5 little kids at home, and she introduced herself and she said, listen, for the next hour and 15 minutes, I offer you the opportunity to leave all your stresses and anxieties and troubles outside the door with your shoes. She said, and I will promise you one thing that will be true. When we're done, you can pick them all up again when you walk out the door. But while you're here, stay present. And you know what happened? Every one of us walked out of that class and our troubles and our stresses and our anxieties were different because of that separation of time. And that can happen in a physical therapy session also if we understand why. If we understand the mechanism, then you know how to help somebody do it.
It sounds very much like, in physical therapy circles, the creation of a therapeutic alliance, getting that patient buy-in, making people like really just be in the moment of, here's a barbell, do 100 reps. No, it's really just really trying to helping them really settle down in their mind and their body so they can actually do the healing that you're trying to do. And I think there's so many, I think really advanced physical therapy practices and yoga principles. They're sort of coming from different angles, but they're trying to go to the same thing, which is basically better patient outcomes or helping people relieve from their suffering. Tomato or tomato. So it seems to me, it's very clear to me that it's a very complementary match between yoga and Anna and kines. I wonder, because I do this to myself all the time, I'm more careful with my patients than I'm with myself when I load my body up strength training. Would yogis sometimes overload themselves too? Where there be common injuries where sometimes people would take on more postures than they should? And how do you think these yogis can benefit from a PT with a yoga background, really help them not get hurt?
I'm going to let Lori handle this because she treats a lot of yogis.
Yeah. I have to say that almost any time I'm someplace teaching anatomy for people who want to be yoga teachers or doing a workshop, always there's a private session here or a private session there. People who are yogis often get injured. But there is some really well-developed research that shows that a person who's involved in an active yoga practice has less injuries than a person who's, let's say, involved in an active tennis practice or an active running practice or skiing. So that those statistics, yes, there are a lot of injuries amongst yoga practitioners, but when you look at the chart, yoga is still less of an injury-inducing activity than some of the other things that we all do when we remain active. So yeah.
It's a common theme, I mean, whatever your physical activity is, whether it's the triathlon or strength training I'm doing, you can bite off more than you can chew. You can just progress the sessions too quickly. And even me, just being married to a wife who practices yoga, she's helped me identify when somebody's doing inversions, when they really shouldn't be doing inversions yet, or they're doing a posture and they're just really substituting like crazy. And I think that's where folks like you who have been playing that space for a long time now, you can be a really great guide to help bring both clients and PTs further along in their knowledge.
Well, I mean, one of the things that we talk about when we teach our workshops is attention to that alignment that you mentioned, and also the idea of if you do sustain an injury, then instead of being angry or frustrated, which we all are for a short period of time, you then look further at where was my compensation? How did this happen? What was going on with me? Was I irritated? Was I not breathing properly? Was my mind distracted when I went and did that so that I ended up essentially not focusing and not paying attention on what we were doing and therefore more susceptible to an injury? The question of why would we overdo something, that's not, a physical therapist would say, don't overdo it. Only do this many reps. But from a yoga perspective, it would be more like, here's what's going on with you. Why are you pushing yourself? What's going on internally that you're willing to push yourself beyond your capacity? And that's on the mat, but that's life. Why are you taking on, for me, why am I scheduling myself till 10 o'clock at night? Why am I working on a weekend? These are questions that are life questions.
Mhm. I love that. You're really, and again, I'm going to say it again, self-efficacy, because those are lessons they take with you well after the sessions are done, and that's applicable on other parts of life that will help them understand, and they understand that the psychosocial part of life very much has a bearing on the biomedical tissue impairment level that people feel. And I think mindful practice both in PTs and yoga practice can really be a benefit.
Absolutely.
Mm. I guess now I'm asking from the perspective, say, of a novice PT or professional who just graduated and who has really been interested in this field of, intermingling the philosophies of yoga with the tenets of physical therapy. What training track or what kind of educational process would you help recommend for them?
Mhm. Yeah. There are yoga teacher trainings that are very comprehensive, both from an anatomy to a philosophy um, to a lifestyle approach, where the teaching is very rooted in ancient traditions. There are teacher training programs that are not as rooted in those traditions. And I know Lori and I both feel that the ones that have that strong foundation are usually more acceptable to physical therapists and occupational therapists, other rehab professionals, because we know a lot walking into that kind of training, and we can make the associations across rehabilitation and yoga. Whereas I think some of the less grounded teacher trainings are about producing teachers who could go and run a high powered, knock 'em dead kind of fitness yoga class. Um, and Laura, you have experience in working with different people.
So I'll be a little bit more forward than Ellen. She was a little bit less direct, but here's the truth. We teach a yoga teacher training specifically for healthcare professionals because we understand the differences between what's out there in the yoga world and what's coming down the pike. There are yoga therapists, and I would say about 5 or 6 years ago, when Ellen and I first went to a conference that introduced us to yoga therapy, it was a disorganized group of people and a disorganized system. And in a very, very short period of time, there are university degrees. It's a 3-year program. It's heavily involved. And it is not our competition exactly, but it is another avenue for somebody out there who is looking for health, healing, and a lifestyle change. So if you are a new physical therapist and you have a long career, because this is not going to bother Ellen and I in the next period of time in our careers. But if you're starting out today, I really think it's an avenue that, yoga teacher training, we teach some workshops, once or twice a year, integrating yoga into physical therapy practice. And the point is exactly that. The yoga therapists are out there. They're using physical activities, physical stretching, physical strengthening activities, including breathing, including meditation, including lifestyle changes. And we are somewhat limited in our ability to teach breathing and meditation and lifestyle changes because of our licenses.
In counterpoint, though, I think any freshly graduated physical therapist will have medical history and pathophysiology and understanding of disease conditions, because not every yogi that walks in that studio is going to be in pristine metabolic or health, right? So I think that's one advantage of any fresh young PT. Could you tell us about your program, the YogiAnatomy workshops, and maybe they can see if your program is something that may speak to them?
Yeah, our yoga teacher training for health professionals takes an approach in which we learn about the yoga philosophy. We'll read certain texts. We'll do some group share. We'll adopt some yoga lifestyle over the course of the training. And so for some people, it may be enhancing their meditation practice. For some people, will be that they want to have a routine pranayama practice. But we ask that everyone practice these different forms of activity independently over the course of the week. And then we meet one weekend a month for an entire weekend, where we then will talk about the experiences, provide some additional foundations, and then go through asana practice as well, where we will talk about, so in cueing in these postures, we need to take into account the tight hip abductor and the weak abductor. So there's no anatomy classes with this group. But we are talking about different health conditions. And so participants in our yoga teacher training will find a scientific article on yoga for stroke or yoga for amputees.
Wow.
And have to develop their own program based on some of that science that was done, and also give us the explanation. Well, I started this class for people post-stroke or people with Parkinson's disease this way because it fits with this philosophy, and it also fits with this diagnosis. Then I did this posture followed by this posture followed by this posture because anatomically it makes sense and it's also necessary for function. And so that's a conversation that we have with people who attend our yoga teacher training that you don't hear in other teacher trainings.
And I have to tell you one other thing. Our last teacher training, two remarkable things that stood out for me when we talk about setting up a yoga class for a patient population. One of our participants read an article about yoga for Parkinson's and then taught the class that was outlined in that research paper. And I have to tell you the truth, it was too hard. We struggled through it. And afterwards, when we sat down to talk about this, we all said, wow, that was not an easy class. That none of us would have thought that a group of people with Parkinson's could get through it. But it was a really rich and robust discussion to help bring us to a different level. And then the other was a student who chose to teach a yoga class for amputees. And that was very instructive, where we as a group were able to take the class and then talk about additional modifications that could be made that might help you connect to the earth a little bit more or achieve what you were looking for. So it's a yoga teacher training with all the aspects of of what you could get out there as far as philosophy or Sanskrit or things like that, but grounded in our practice.
Wow. Do you guys have a website that people can visit so that they can learn more about you guys?
Yes, we do. It's called YogiAnatomy.
I'm flashing it right here. And it's an interesting world we live in right now. So I think courses might be a little bit, we're not really sure how we're going to go about this for now, but are there still learning options for them that way, even in the interesting times we're in?
Yeah, so we have begun to do two things. One is that we've been posting videos on our website. For the average physical therapist, they may be a little bit basic because right now we're really focusing on, not so basic.
I don't think they're so basic.
Right now we're really focusing on explanations for yogis or people who want to become yoga teachers. For example, we have something on carpal tunnel and how you might modify your yoga practice if you have symptoms of carpal tunnel. But then we also have something related to shoulder anatomy, which an average PT is not going to need to watch that video. So we've been doing that given the times we live in. However, despite all our cancellations since the beginning of March, we have decided to move forward and do our weekend retreat in Vermont.
Oh, nice.
And Vermont is so far a safe place. We know that we will have the inn pretty much to ourselves, and our practice space will only be the participants in the program. And we're also limiting the number of people because of that. And we decided to move ahead with teacher training because of the cancellation that we needed to make before, where it was very unpredictable whether we could do everything in person. So our intention is to move forward with as much in-person practice, doing asana, alignment, teaching classes. And if we need to, we will have a live streaming in for the teachings of the harmonium and chanting and pranayama and meditation and some of the Ayurveda. Right. So we'll have some sort of modules, if you will, that will be available online if we need to do it that way. Right. But we're hoping not to. Right.
And also there are some essays and some research shorts on our website that if you are a healthcare professional accustomed to reading research, there's some interesting information there as well.
Oh, wow. So I'm glad that, you guys as the resource are still available. And, I think there's just interest in this field, whether from a massive audience to just very specialized practitioners. There is this real interest in the practice of yoga. And I'm so glad that you guys are out there and you guys are out, trying to marry some of the science with the philosophy so that our patients and our clients can benefit. So I thank you for that, guys.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, guys. So once again, this is Dr. Laurie Zucker and Dr. Ellen Anderson. They are the owners of YogiAnatomy, and the website is yogianatomy.com. And you can find more information there, and hopefully they can be a guide to you in your practice.
Just listen, one more thing.
Yes.
On our Instagram account, we've been posting quizzes, and they are being well regarded by both physical therapists and by yogis, because when somebody has a quick quiz question about the rotator cuff or about carpal tunnel, it's good for all of us to remind ourselves of those things.
What's your user handle?
It's
YogiAnatomy.
At YogiAnatomy. So follow them on Instagram. They're on Instagram. They're on Facebook.
Yes.
They're on Twitter.
Yes.
So anywhere in the civilized United States that has a cell phone signal, you're probably going to be able to reach out to them. Once again, ladies, thank you so much. It's always a fun time talking to you. And I hope that we are going to have a in-person classes soon.
Take care. Thanks so much.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening today to the Life in Motion podcast. Striving for excellence doesn't demand perfection, just be a little better in all that we do than yesterday. This has been Aguila. Till our next episode. God bless.